TDC Automotive is paying for you. Deposit? We're paying. 3-month installments? We're paying. Pay nothing for 3 months because we are paying. Take a moment, catch your breath, and roll out with ease. Save over $20,000 off your new Toyota Hiace because TDC Automotive is paying. Get your Toyota Hiace today. TDC Automotive, #1 for a reason. Terms and conditions apply.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Good morning, and welcome to Inside the News here on Win FM 98.9. I am your host today, Kevon Brown, standing in for your usual Devon Cornelius. Today, Inside the News is brought to you by TDC and Carib Breweries, St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you very much for your continued sponsorship of Inside the News. Now, today's show will be focusing on those individuals who have had COVID-19 and they've recovered, but unfortunately they have had what is called post-COVID-19 condition or long COVID. So we're going to delve into what is long COVID, and to help me with that discussion, I have with me today Dr. Cuthbert Sebastian. Good morning, Dr. Sebastian.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and how are you?
Doing well, thank you.
Fantastic. So let's just dive right in. What is long COVID for the people who might not know?
Okay, so long COVID is basically any symptoms that you may have had from COVID-19 that persists at least 12 weeks after recovering from the virus. So these symptoms can include a host of things. There's over 200 different types of symptoms that have been reported worldwide. Some, for example, are body pain, brain fog, which is when you can't think clearly or effectively. Some are difficulty breathing. Some can be loss of taste, loss of the sense of smell for a prolonged period of time. Some are nerve pains. There's so many different things. Like I said, there could be over 200 different things. And it's just the symptoms that persist after, for longer than 12 weeks after recovering from COVID-19.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for that. And you did mention that there are over 200 symptoms, and I guess the symptoms depend heavily on, I guess, the individual, their state, their health, their well-being, etc., etc.
Yeah.
There have been people in St. Kitts that have reported long COVID symptoms, correct?
Yes, they have.
Okay, and what has been your experience in those situations?
The main symptom I've been seeing reported here is chronic body pain and tiredness and fatigue, and also difficulty breathing. And it's been at least a couple of months after they have recovered from COVID-19, and they're still having these symptoms, and it's persistent and it's debilitating, because to have to get up every day, let's say you are a healthy person before, and now you are suffering from fatigue, body pain, difficulty breathing. It's hard for you to function in everyday life. And so that's why long COVID is a pretty big problem with COVID-19 infections.
I've actually seen several reports in media, internationally, regionally,
Yeah.
where we have healthy individuals, people who work out, not the regular 3 times a day that's suggested by medical professionals, but they work out 5 times, sometimes 6 times a day, and they've had COVID-19, and because of not just COVID-19 but the long COVID conditions that they've had after has completely debilitated and just ravaged their bodies.
Yeah.
So in that situation, how do you explain somebody going from being just the pinnacle of seemingly health to then being just debilitated? And
Well, being fit, working out, doesn't necessarily mean that your immune system is functioning at its best capability. Because, for instance, if I'm working out, people, they can change and alter their diets to achieve a certain goal, whether it is to build muscle, etc., like that. But funny enough, you need a healthy amount of fat in your diet to actually create a good immune system. It helps with your immunity. So because your work look fit, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking in the right nutrients. So there's macronutrients like your carbohydrates, your protein, and your fats. Those are your macronutrients. And then you have your micronutrients, your vitamins, your sodium, your potassium, so calcium. So there's all these different things that play a part into your immune system. So yes, your macronutrients might affect how fit you look and stuff mostly, but your micronutrients, they also affect your immune system. Your fat level affects your immune system and those type of things. So even though they may seem fit and stuff like that, it doesn't necessarily mean they're hitting all the goal marks of what a healthy immune system means.
that's some interesting stuff right there, because I know that previously they said that persons who were obese or severely overweight, they were at a higher risk for
Yeah.
COVID-19, as well as anybody with any other comorbidity and any other NCDs.
Yep.
But to think that somebody who works out regularly would fit into that category just because they might be focusing
on
the
wrong thing. So your body needs a certain amount of everything to function at its best. That includes fats. So there's good fats that you need to have enough of in your diet that your body's immune system can function of. It's really hard to actually manage it because we have a society filled with a lot of carbohydrate foods, bread, rice, pasta, all these things. And not that carbohydrates are bad, but you have to have, your body only needs a certain amount of everything per day. If you go over it, you kind of, your body doesn't use that. It's waste, or it becomes excess. And that excess can turn into fat that your body doesn't need. That's where your body stores it and stuff like that. So to find that right balance for your body size and stuff, that's extremely important to get the healthiest immune system.
But as you said, it's a kind of a tedious process to go through.
It really is.
Yeah, go through that entire thing, because you're talking about macros and micros, and for those who don't pay attention to fitness in that regard, would have no idea what you're talking about.
Exactly. I'm actually a on this fitness journey myself right now, since the beginning of last month. So I've been really keyed in on managing how much of whatever I'm taking in and stuff like that. I mean, there's a bunch of apps right now that you can literally just scan the food or type it in, and it'll give you, okay, this is how much you're taking in, and it'll track all your nutrients that you need based on your height and body weight per day, etc.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
And I don't imagine most people would pay attention to it.
Yeah.
And, I think that's where a lot of people fall short in that. Well, I wouldn't say they fall short. Let me reword that. Because of certain situations, you mentioned that we are a society or a culture that is very heavy on starch. We love starch.
We love
if
it.
you see a plate on Christmas, it is filled to the brim
With starch.
with
It's
starch.
at least three different types of starch. You have your potato salad, you might have some rice, you might have macaroni pie on the same plate. So, you might have breaded meat, then you just added starch to your protein.
Right, and don't even talk about bread, because bread is a significant staple in our culture.
Oh, we love bread. You know how many times I had to travel and bring bread away?
Yes, that is a regular thing that we go through. But we're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors, and then we're going to come right back and delve a little bit deeper into long COVID and its effects on all of us.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
People make the world go
Shopping with TDC just got much easier. Here's how. Log on to shoptdcgroup.com. Shop at your convenience at any time, from anywhere, with your smartphone, tablet, or computer. With our safe and secure payment checkout, you choose the option to pick up in-store or have your goods delivered right to your door. It's that easy. Shop tdcgroup.com, your one-stop online store.
Shop anywhere, shop anytime, same quality you love. Now online. Shop www.shoptdcgroup.com.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
And we're back with Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9. And I am your host today, Kevon Brown. And joined with me this morning is Dr. Cuthbert Sebastian, a emergency physician from the Joseph and France General Hospital. And we are talking about COVID-19 and long COVID symptoms. I'm going to touch on a specific topic within COVID-19, long COVID specifically. And I wanted to know if you thought we had a good account of how many people may have symptoms, long COVID. The reason why I ask is because I know within certain cultures, specifically within men, they have a hard time whenever they're in pain or whenever they might have an issue. They have a hard time going to the doctor and reporting whatever pain or symptoms they might be having to doctors. Do you think we have a good account of how many people actually have long COVID?
I mean, I think we have a reasonably decent account regarding that, because we follow up the patients who have COVID, and we tell them, if you're having any issues, then you please come back. I mean, a lot of that responsibility is on the patient to report what they're feeling. Some patients may feel more comfortable going to a private doctor, and that may, definitely skew the data on it. Because the private doctor may not necessarily report the problems back to the ministry. But I think we have a fairly good account. And if anyone is experiencing those feelings after COVID-19, any problems, then they should definitely, report it or to the health officials, and, just so we can have an account, because long COVID can be, a long-term problem. And if we have a population that's debilitated, then that's a problem for the country. It's a national problem, so.
Accurate. So please, anyone listening that you might have symptoms, even if you didn't have COVID-19 before, if you have cold-like symptoms and you feel not normally sick, it's something different, it feels different, report it, or stay home. Avoid interactions in public, face-to-face interactions as much as possible if you are not feeling well. Someone just messaged me and said I asked the same question that they were thinking about as it relates to reporting. To your knowledge, though, because we're talking about long COVID, but I wanted to touch on COVID-19 infections and the possibility of reinfections. So do you, to your knowledge, has anyone reported having COVID-19 more than once within the Federation?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, they have.
Okay. Because I know that was kind of an issue. I'm recalling, I think it was Brazil at one point, they were rolling out their vaccine down there, and COVID-19 numbers were dropping, and then after a while, because of the variant that reappeared down there, there were a lot of reinfections.
Most of these variants, so if you have let's say you have the COVID-19 virus, and then they have the spike proteins around it. So what the viruses do is they use the spike proteins to latch on to your cells and infect your cells through their spike proteins. Most of the variants have a change in their spike proteins. So their spike proteins are a little different. So for instance, the Delta variant, its spike protein, why it seems to infect more people, is its spike protein changed. It adapted very well so that it can infect your cell through its spike protein. So it's kind of like the key to unlock your cell so it can get it. So it basically mutated into something where that it can infect your cell a lot more easily. So that is probably why someone can get a second infection from a different variant, because that variant might be more adapted to quickly infect the cell than the previous one. So that's another reason why you can get two
Right.
infections.
There was this one report that I saw a couple of weeks back where this, I think he was an 80-year-old. He was from the UK, and
He's been infected for
constantly
like,
had infections for months.
for
on
months and
end.
months
He
on
was
end.
just being reinfected and reinfected and reinfected, and that is slightly worrying.
Well, he's actually one of the anomalies. I mean, that doesn't usually happen. I think they need to do some more research into why that is happening to him. So clearly, the virus has a clear affinity to, or he's just susceptible to being infected by this virus. So the question is why? Is it something to do with his genetics? Does he have a certain marker on his cells that it makes it easier for the virus to infect in than other people? So I think it has to do mainly with his genetics, because that's not common. He's like the 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million
Probably
person.
1 in a billion, to
Yeah,
be quite
probably,
honest.
yeah.
But when I was reading the report, it's like I'm happy that he actually survived having COVID
That
for
long.
that long and
Yeah.
surviving the reinfections, because who knows what the reinfections could have done, getting so accustomed to his genetics, his immune system.
Yeah.
It could have gotten, just in that one person, it could have
could have-
gotten a lot worse.
Yeah, exactly.
But I got a question from a listener. They are wondering, what do you think are the long-term impacts on the working population as cases increase?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that, actually. And it's a very complex question. So if infections increase, it's not necessarily detrimental to the working population if an infection, or at least what we know it as a positive result, doesn't actually make you sick. Meaning it doesn't debilitate you, you don't have to stay home from work, etc. If that's the case, then that should be fine. That means everyone can get to work and function. So let's say I had COVID-19. Let's say I had COVID-19 and I don't have any symptoms. And because I'm vaccinated, not saying you can't have no symptoms when you're unvaccinated, but I'm less likely to have symptoms and be not functional if I'm vaccinated. That means a larger majority of the population can go out and work and society can still function. So when you put that into the big picture, it makes sense. The more you vaccinate, that the more society can continue to function, because you have a higher likelihood that you don't get these symptoms and you don't have to go off of work or anything, and you can still take care of your family and these type of things. But if we don't reach to, I guess, a certain level where individuals can be vaccinated and they don't get as sick, then it can definitely affect the working class, because people will be sick. More people will be sick. Not saying that you can be fully vaccinated and you don't get symptoms, because that can happen. There are breakthrough infections and people can get symptoms. But there's hardly worldwide statistics, percentage-wise, I should say, because each life is important, that people die. So in the U.S., they say it's 99% of people who are fully vaccinated that don't die, and there's roughly a 1% chance that you can die even if you're fully vaccinated in the U.S. But you compare that to the individuals who are unvaccinated, then obviously that changes. You have a higher likelihood, and so the whole goal is to decrease your risk of dying. And when you decrease your risk being vaccinated, then you decrease everybody else's risk. So vaccinations were always meant to be a community thing. It was never meant for an individual. I take the vaccine so I'm safe. No, it was always meant since the beginning of time, it's always meant that everyone should take this for the betterment of everyone. That's always been the case with vaccines, from smallpox to polio to all these different vaccines. The community is what matters.
Right, right. And in your statement just now, you touched on an interesting point as it relates to the U.S. and their vaccination rates and the effects on the workforce being lowered because they might have a higher vaccination rate, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the inverse, as you mentioned, can happen as well, where we don't have enough vaccinated people, and there are plenty of countries still right now. The World Health Organization has continually reported it. PAHO has continually reported that some countries, less than 20% of their population, have received at least one dose, and some haven't even received any.
Yeah.
And the workforce in those countries, the economy in those countries, as infection rates might spike in those countries, will be detrimental to those people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a serious problem. And it's not even just a problem in those countries. It's actually a problem for us as well. Even the countries that are highly vaccinated, because we live in globalization is real. So we live in a world where I can leave St. Kitts today and I can end up in Dubai the same day, you know? So in a couple of hours, I can cross the Atlantic and go to England. And millions of people are doing that every day. So just to focus on one country that won't do. Every country has to be up to par, or this will never work. So instead of treating it as the vaccination rate of a country, we should really take it as the world, because globalization is real. We're moving back and forth. Planes fly every minute of the day, take off every minute of the day, if not sooner than that. So we have to treat it as a worldwide problem, not just a country problem. So one country can have, let's say, 100% vaccination, but then people are migrating in and out of that country constantly. That number isn't set, you know?
One country that I was observing, well, I think everybody was observing, was the U.S. as it relates to that.
Yeah.
Before the summer, numbers were starting to decline, more people were getting vaccinated, so states started to free up themselves a little bit, you know what I mean? And
then
summertime hit. Everybody was traveling, everybody was going everywhere.
Everyone's traveling to and from the States in the summer.
From the States, coming from places that have different variants, coming from places that have surges.
Exactly.
And the numbers right now in the U.S. are right on the rise again.
Yeah.
And it brings me to the other point that I wanted to touch on as it pertains to COVID and long COVID as well. COVID-19 in young people specifically.
Yeah.
Because I remember at the beginning of this pandemic, a lot of the times the focus was on people with comorbidities, NCDs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Obese, diabetes, hypertension, that sort of thing. And the older persons, that was the fear that the virus was going to attack them. And there was suggestions that the infection rate in younger individuals, especially children, was lower. Now that has actually been thrown out the window.
Well, the infection rate is probably around the same or close to the same, for probably a different number of reasons. Children tend to not social distance and those type of things, depending on the age and those type of things. But what has actually been proven is that they don't tend to get as severe as adults. Yeah, funny enough, they don't. Well, I mean, children just tend to bounce back from everything. They don't tend to be as severe as adults. Not saying that there aren't children who become severe, but in the adult population, we seem to be getting a lot more sick than kids. Long COVID seems to be less in children as well. I think for the adult population, it's about 1 to 2% of 100,000 people will get long COVID in adult population. In the children population, it's like probably 1 to 1.5%. So it's a little lower, you know. But even though it's a little lower, it doesn't mean that it's not significant, you know.
1% might sound like a small number.
It's a big number.
It's a big number
It's
if
a
you
big
consider
number.
the population.
It's a big number. I mean, 1% of, let's say, St. Kitts population is 48, I want to say 50,000. St. Kitts and Nevis. 1% of, 50,000, that's, 500. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to me.
That's a lot of people to me too.
Yeah.
Imagine 500 people in a small island federation suffering for 12 to 15 weeks from debilitating conditions that make it hard for them to move, to breathe, to work, to function in society, period.
Yeah.
And it not only takes a physical toll, but it could probably take
A mental.
a mental toll as well.
Depression is actually, reactive depression is actually a symptom of long COVID, because you become so depressed with your situation. And imagine I'm a young, fit person who could exercise, do what I want to do, and I can't do that anymore. I can't go to work anymore. My life has changed, and this may be permanent. I don't know. And that must have an effect on your mental state. So, it's a scary thing.
Very much so. I was doing a little bit of research on some of the numbers, and not just because of today's conversation, but because of a conversation I had with a friend of mine in the States, where he was mentioning that the pediatric section of hospitals are currently facing some issues in certain parts of the states, specifically those states with lower vaccination rates, where children are getting COVID-19 and ending up in the hospital, probably because of the Delta variant.
Yeah.
So it seems like in the states where things are still free and a little loose, especially when it pertains to vaccine acceptance, because the states, I think, has access to vaccines more.
They have more than enough.
Easier than a lot of parts of the rest
I
of the
mean,
world.
they're giving us Pfizer.
Exactly.
They're giving Pfizer out.
Millions of doses.
Exactly,
They've been
yeah.
giving out constantly. They've given out Moderna. They've given Johnson & Johnson. They've given Pfizer. They've given AstraZeneca.
Yeah.
The U.S. has constantly donated doses. So
Yeah.
it seems like they have more than enough doses. But because in certain states there's a lack of vaccine acceptance, the vaccination rates seem to be...
Well, funny enough, I was actually looking at this documentary about that in I think it was the Ozarks in the States. Low vaccination rate. And funny enough, so the interviewer was basically saying, you can ask anyone, most people know someone who has died from COVID-19, but they don't want to get vaccinated still. And it's because most of them said, I don't want anyone to tell me what to do. That was their response, So a lot of them had a lot of the same ideas that the rest of the world had and the rest of the country had is, our natural immune system will take care of it. And then they went on further to interview people who were actually in the hospital, and they're just like, they need assistance breathing, but they're like, maybe I should have considered the vaccine. It's better than what I'm going through now. And, even though I can potentially recover without it, I just don't want to go through it. At the end of the interview, they mentioned some of these people passed, some recovered, which was fine, but why take that chance? I mean, I feel like the vaccine has, I mean the Pfizer at least has been FDA approved. I mean, they've been trying to approve get approval from the FDA for months now, and it's a tedious process. To
Right.
get
I think it normally takes 5 months based on what I was reading.
5 to
earlier.
6 months.
5 to 6 months for any vaccine to get actual approval.
Yeah, so that meaning they had to have applied for it a while ago for it to actually get approved. But you know, it's been in existence at least for over a year now, a little bit more than a year now, based on when the studies started. So far, so good. At least with over a year's worth of monitoring people who were originally taking these vaccines.
Right. Well, apart from those that, as it relates to people who are not for the vaccine
Yeah.
or don't trust the vaccine or whatever reason, apart from the reason why they don't like anyone telling them what to do, which I can see as an actionable reason, to be quite honest. It kind of makes sense if you consider how humans operate.
I mean, I
sometimes.
don't like anyone telling me what to do either.
Right. It feels like you have. Sometimes it feels like you have no control, and
Yeah.
that little bit of rebellion might, I guess, reinstate some control in your life. But apart from that, there are people who have actual concerns with the vaccines, and some people are waiting to see
What's gonna happen?
what's gonna happen.
Well, this is how vaccines work. Basically, they take apart any vaccine. Scientists might use a different method, but in the basic sense, all vaccines take a part of a virus or bacteria or whatever, and they show it to your body in whatever way they choose to show it, whether it is the AstraZeneca way, where they used a virus to prevent, a common cold virus to present the coronavirus spike proteins to the body. That's how the AstraZeneca worked. So they just use the common cold virus to basically carry that information to the body to present the protein, and then your body reacts to it, and the immune system works and builds up antibodies and memory to protect against an actual infection. How the Pfizer and Moderna work, basically they use messenger RNA, which is basically carries information to your cells to produce these coronavirus spike proteins, and your body develops an immune response to that, because that's the coronavirus spike proteins that's foreign to it, and it's going to create an immune response. If you get infected with the virus, then your body is going to again produce this immune response. So it is highly unlikely, not saying it's completely impossible, right? It's highly unlikely that these vaccines will have long-term effects for the majority of the population. I'm not saying that people haven't ever reacted or had bad side effects of the vaccines, because there have been reports. Pfizer had myocarditis, pericarditis, which is inflammation of the hearts. They're still doing some further research to see the exact cause, but it's extremely very few, and most of those patients recovered. Right, majority of them recovered. That's very treatable, and these patients have recovered, majority of them. Funny enough, the coronavirus can cause some of these same side effects that we're speaking about, and at a much higher rate. So then the risk versus benefit is, okay, I have a higher likelihood of getting these problems from the coronavirus than these problems from the vaccine. And the rate at which, look at the Delta, it's become way more contagious.
Yes.
It's spreading to everyone faster, and there's a new one now called the Mu.
Yes.
That's coming. We don't really have that much information on it yet, but it's one of they're just looking at it to see what happens.
I think it was made variant of interest. Yeah,
Interest.
on October 30th. By the World Health Organization. So there's still, and apparently it was present since January, January this year, but it wasn't
Prevalent.
that prevalent. But now it seems like
It's
they've-
catching steam.
Yep, it's
It's
catching
gaining
some steam. But you were mentioning about the vaccine and its protective measures. And I know that the U.S. was thinking about, I'm not sure if they started it yet or
A
not.
booster?
Yeah, the boosters.
They've started it.
They've started it officially.
But in a certain population, I think it's more so like the elderly or a certain subgroup of population that are high risk.
Right.
And that's what they've done. So,
Do you imagine boosters will become a regular thing? Because I know that some officials, some epidemiologists around the world have been saying that there's a possibility that the coronavirus will become endemic.
endemic? Yeah.
So it'll be like the common cold,
Or the flu?
but a lot
Yeah,
stronger.
You know, the funny part is we're not seeing much flu viruses anymore. And we used to consider that endemic, right?
Right.
So that's slowly dwindling away. And funny enough, it's because the coronavirus took its place. So it's kind of like if you look at wildlife and you look at the food chain. So let's say the flu was the top predator, and the coronavirus came in and kicked it out of its spot. And because the flu virus doesn't have hosts
All right. It
to
dies
take over,
off.
it dies off. And that's basically what happened. But the way to deal with the coronavirus, I know a lot of epidemiologists are predicting that it'll be endemic. It's quite possible, but we won't really know if it's going to be endemic unless we get to a point where we have a very large amount of people in the world vaccinated. We won't know for sure because there'll always be enough people for the virus to spread extremely fast and people to get really sick. So we won't really know. We do see, however, like for instance, we do see forever that they're usually, the virus usually tends to die out after a while in different countries. And then there's a surge for whatever reason. It could be that this country had an influx of people. It could be this country had some type of celebration. Like I know in India they celebrated one of their cultural, I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly.
I
what it
can't
was.
recall the name, but I remember it was early up this year. And part of the images showed that many people were
gathered
together, specifically in like a body of water, I think
Yeah.
was one of the situations. Yes.
And that's when they started to have their surge. But what it tells me is it proves that, okay, this virus can die out. It can die out. But when you but because of globalization and all these things and gathering and stuff, so until that virus dies out completely, then it has a possibility of resurgence. So along with, these different protocols, social distancing, being vaccinated, sanitizing, all these have to be implemented in such a way where it dies out to an extent where it doesn't become a problem worldwide. So if you can die out in a country that's isolated, imagine if all the countries in the world did what they're supposed to do, and it slowly dies down and the numbers dwindle. So I see there is a path forward. It's probably an extremely difficult path. It's probably an extremely unrealistic path.
Oh yeah, I
Because,
understand that. Yes.
But I do believe that there's actually a path forward, but it really depends on everyone.
Right.
And that's the problem. It's
Early on, I had
too many
I had
variables.
What you call a very unrealistic path as to how to stop this situation, and I've said it countless times to my friends and family. At the beginning of this thing, well, it started in December of 2019, but it didn't really become worldwide news until around January or so. And people mentioned that media outlets were mentioning that Wuhan closed off itself because of a possible pandemic. I was like, okay, so Wuhan, so nobody's moving in and out of Wuhan. And then I started to hear reports of nationals leaving Wuhan to go to wherever they want. I was like, that's a problem. Because this is a new thing, apparently, according to all the reports that were going on. This is new, and you're letting people leave. Now, I understand that it's a scary situation, and you want to be where you want to be where you feel safest, which is home.
Yeah.
But in a situation that is so unknown and possibly dangerous, to actually let people out of an isolation zone that was known to be ground zero.
Yeah.
You found out that it was ground zero early on. You isolated it, but yet you let people leave. It seems like that was just
That's detrimental.
yes. And in my mind, I was like, so why not just not let them leave? Because they're basically saying that if they stay in one place for about 3 weeks, it should die out.
Basically.
And then it didn't. I was like, wow.
Well, because it's spread around the world.
Yes.
And you may not have known that you had it, and you spreading it and spreading it and spreading it and spreading it. So yeah, I mean, if the world could stop for 3 weeks.
If the world, yes, exactly. That was my unrealistic thought. If the world could have just stopped for 3 weeks.
Yeah, but unfortunately it can't.
I know.
Because
economics and all that stuff.
Not even economics, other health issues.
Other health issues. People have other underlying conditions,
and they need
they're
to
being
be seen
treated
and
for
stuff
certain.
like that.
Yes.
And like, who's gonna go get the food?
That's
who's
why.
gonna bring in
That's why
food?
I said it was unrealistic.
I know.
But
So
still.
yeah, I know. So that's the problem. So that's why they're probably saying it may be endemic, because to do something like that, it's nearly impossible.
It's impossible.
Initially, like you said, in the Wuhan, if they kept everyone there, that may have been our window of opportunity to stop it without having to go through all of this.
Okay. Well, if anyone that is listening has any questions concerning COVID-19, long COVID, for Dr. Sebastian while he's here for another 15 minutes, please feel free to call in. The numbers to call are 466-0989, 662-0989, 762-0989, and if you're calling from the U.S., you can call 718-285-6984 or 305-921-4619. We can take one or two questions from outside for Dr. Sebastian as it relates to long COVID. Or if you have any questions as it pertains to the Pfizer vaccine that has been recently rolled out. And someone was waiting to call in. Caller, we lost that caller. Caller, please call back. I wanted you to highlight a little bit more about the Pfizer vaccine, specifically how it's administered, the process that they have to go through.
Oh gosh, listen, the Pfizer vaccine is an extremely complicated vaccine. It's one of the more complicated vaccines I've ever seen.
Right.
Let me make sure I get all the details. So
before you dive in, we have a caller.
Okay.
Good morning, caller. You're live on Inside the News.
Greetings.
Greetings.
Same to you, yes. Give thanks for the sharing so far, We want to make an observation, share an observation, but before we do, we want to echo something we shared already. It's just a short punchline. The pandemic, endemic, corona, whatever, shows her true color, even that of another. Okay, we are seeing a trend, and we are saying that we wondering if that is the way to go. Here in the Federation and in other parts of the region, we are seeing where one's reacting to what is unfolding in personal ways, like with ones in government, reacting to ones who are in government, whether it be the leader or the ministers or whatever the position one hold. We see people. We have even seen the shedding of blood by the Honorable PM of St. Vincent and citizen also. We see blood running. And what we think is people should take it to another level of within the scheme of things. Done with the personalities in our midst and try to identify the core, the origin of this whatever, corona, whatever, as I said before. Identify the core and the source and the reason for this. And collectively deal with that situation, instead of we having this continual melee in our midst of the people. Because what we are seeing, is that this thing that is unfolding is further dividing us as a people. I'm talking about my race of people right now. I'm not, of course, we're embracing humanity, but right now I'm talking about my race. My race. We are seeing further disunity because of this situation that is unfolding globally. And we always say that we as a people, we have a different story to a lot of other people, especially us of the race who was taken away and scattered and still dispersed unto this day. We need to deal with things in a more intelligent way and not allow these things, because they will continue happening, No matter what the crisis is, Bob said, we have to override it. We have to stay on top of things. Yeah. I don't think we are on top of things the way we are going down each other's throat when things like these happen. No, we are missing the ball.
All right, thank
you,
caller.
We are missing the boat. Thanks very much for listening to us. We realize we are the first call and others might want to put in the penny here.
Yes.
Give thanks for listening to us. Blessed love.
Thank you very much, caller.
All right, man.
For the sharing so far.
Take care.
Thank you, caller, for your contribution. And I think one of the things he was touching on was trying to find the source. And I think they've been trying to find the source of this virus for a very long time. I was doing some research for a piece I was doing, and I think the team that they sent earlier this year to China to see if they could find a source suggested a multitude of avenues.
I mean, it's difficult to find the exact source of something.
Right.
I mean, you can use genetics to see, okay, I know they used that with the bat. It was closely related, and they could probably see what changed for it to become effective to humans, and then therefore becoming this. But it's a difficult process. They may never find the source. Perhaps if they did find the source, finding ways to treating it would be easier.
We would be doing cures instead of vaccines.
Yeah.
But we were speaking about the process for Pfizer before we run out of time, so that people could, have an idea of how that actually works.
So, as you know, Pfizer is stored in negative 70 degrees Celsius. That's how it should be stored. It has two parts of it. It has the powder and it has the solution. Okay? So, when you're storing it, it has to move down to negative 20 degrees Celsius. And then after that, it then has to move down to a regular refrigerator. So as you know, that could take at least a day or so for it to thaw out. So it has to thaw out to a certain temperature, between 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. Then the solution has to be mixed at the same temperature that this is at. If you don't mix at the same temperature, it's gone wrong. So, and you can't move back up in terms of temperature.
It can't be refrozen.
It can't be refrozen
Mm-hmm.
after it's thawed. And after you're mixing it, you have to make sure not to shake it too much. You have to slowly move it up and down, very gently, very lightly, or that could do some damage to it. So it's a whole training process.
It's a very involved
that
process.
that you have to go through in order to be able to handle the Pfizer vaccine. That's probably why the rollout has taken so long.
And it's probably why it's being done by appointments as well.
Yes, because if you can't afford to lose a dose of it. Because if you thaw it then and no one comes, then that's it.
It goes to waste.
You know, it
Because
goes to waste.
I think after it's punctured, I think it said they have about six hours to use
Yep.
it before it goes
Yep.
bad. So that is how the Pfizer works, ladies and gentlemen. But we have a caller calling in, and we'll entertain this last call. Good morning, caller. You're live on in. Oop. We lost that caller. We'll take this one. Good morning. You're live on Inside the News. Unfortunately, we lost that caller. But we are just 2 minutes to the hour of 12, according to my clock. And before that, after that, we will have the headline news. But Dr. Sebastian, before you go, do you want to leave any parting words as it relates to COVID, long COVID? How should someone with long COVID help to alleviate some of their symptoms, if there is a way, etc.?
So currently, there's no direct treatment for long COVID. Well, actually, no. Let me dial back. It's actually showing if you haven't been vaccinated, it actually reduces some of the symptoms. That's what it's been shown in some UK studies that they've been doing. It reduces the severity of the symptoms, and it actually plays into the what they think is the mechanism of long COVID. They have three theories. One is the virus actually does so much damage that it leaves you with these effects. Two, the virus causes, when you get COVID, your immune system, people with strong immune systems react, and your immune system itself attacks you from getting COVID-19. And three is that the virus, like some viruses that we know now, actually hides in the body and waits to re-emerge again. And that's why you would have the long COVID symptoms. But then you would still test positive for that virus. So that's one of the more weaker theories. But there's no direct treatment. It depends on the symptoms. If you get vaccinated after you have long COVID, I hear it reduces the symptoms in some studies. I think by 50% of people get reduced symptoms if you get vaccinated. I didn't touch on the boosters. I actually wanted to touch on the boosters a little bit.
You could touch on it a little bit, yes.
So, yes, we are having, we're probably going to get another shot, but funny enough is most vaccinations that we have don't usually end in one shot. They don't usually end in 2 shots. A lot of them have 3 shots to actually get the best out of your immunity. I'm not saying the booster shot can't be a yearly thing, because we don't know yet. It really depends on if the virus mutates into something different, because there's a new type of coronavirus nearly every few months.
It's a possibility, yeah.
And then we might need something else for it.
Right.
If it changes too much. But so far, what the FDA, the CDC has said is that these vaccines are effective against all of these strains. All right, they reduce your risk against all of them that are currently here, which is a good thing.
All right. All right, thank you, Dr. Sebastian, for sharing that. We will take a break now for the headline news, and we will be right back with more Inside the News. Stay tuned.
You found the sound. 98.9. Win FM.
We now bring you the headline news. The headline news is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, and Caribou.
We are faced with tough decisions every day, but choosing the right home or motor insurance shouldn't be one. You need fast claim settlement from a company that's been rooted for over 31 years. And don't forget the A Excellent rating by AM Best. Make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Reliable insurance that you can count on. Get a quote today for your home, motor, contents, and liability insurance needs, and make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance. Tomorrow secured. Local agents, Dalil Walwyn & Co. Limited. Telephone 465-2631 or 469-5303 for the Nevis office.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
With the Win Headline News,
I'm Devon Cornelius.
Making the headlines.
Face-to-face learning on Nevis delayed 1 week. Autopsy performed on the body of Wilson Dorr. Jamaica's COVID fatalities at a record high. More than 10,000 apply for advance poll in Bahamas. Biden visits Louisiana to inspect Hurricane Ida damage.
Now, the details.
An autopsy was performed on the body of 21-year-old Keniqua David of Sadler's, St. Kitts on September 1st, 2021 by resident pathologist Dr. Adrian Nunez. Dr. Nunez concluded that death was due to severe craniofacial trauma as a result of a motor vehicular accident. An autopsy was performed on the body of 44-year-old Wilson Dorr of Bath, Village Nevis, on September 2nd, 2021 by resident pathologist Dr. Adrian Nunez. Dr. Nunez concluded that death was due to left hemopneumothorax as a result of blunt trauma to the left hemothorax rib fracture. Police say investigations into the matter are ongoing. Nevis's Ministry of Education says all public schools on the island will not reopen for face-to-face learning on Monday, following the revelation of a possible COVID-19 exposure at the ministry's office at Marion Heights. A statement issued Friday night, September 3rd, said the physical reopening of all public schools on Nevis will be delayed for 1 week. The ministry said further updates in relation to the transition to virtual learning and the way forward for their students and staff will be provided. 9 new cases were identified Friday, bringing the island's total confirmed cases to 185. Active COVID-19 cases have climbed to 141. 44 have recovered and 2 are in hospital.
In regional news,
Jamaica's COVID fatalities at a record high.
For the release of today's COVID figures, we've been delving into the numbers of COVID deaths since the third wave. The data reveal just how deadly the month of August has been in this COVID crisis. On the last day of July, Jamaica recorded 342 new COVID cases and 6 deaths. But those numbers now pale in comparison to the repeated new highs set throughout August. In the first week of August, that is, before the Independence weekend, Jamaica was worried with single-digit daily deaths. But by the end of week 2, August 14, there were 15 deaths in one day. Then 22 deaths reported on August 25, and ending the month with a record 31 COVID deaths reported on August 31. The breakdown on the Health Ministry's website shows 7 deaths each in Kingston and St. Andrew and St. Anne. Westmoreland and St. Catherine recorded 5 each, with St. Thomas, St. Elizabeth and St. Mary recording 4, 2 and 1 respectively. When tallied, for the month of August alone, 353 Jamaicans died because of COVID-19. Of that number, Westmoreland, Hanover and St. James combined account for 30%, 105 deaths. Kingston and St. Andrew had 73, St. Elizabeth 40, and St. Anne 38. Overall, between March 2020 and August 31 this year, Kingston and St. Andrew have recorded the most deaths, 361, followed by St. Catherine 206, St. James 187, Westmoreland 147, and St. Elizabeth with 124, rounding out the parishes with the 5 highest number of fatalities. The daily case count also hit record highs throughout August. On August 1, 191 new cases were recorded. Drastic increases over the following 4 weeks saw daily new case count reach an all-time high of 929 on August 28. The number of local COVID cases since March last year is now 68,482, but almost a quarter of those infections happened in August this year alone. On August 31, 351 new cases were recorded from 1,099 samples, bringing the positivity rate to 40.6%. Based on projections, health professionals say this third wave of rapid increase in cases and deaths is still not at its peak. Hospitals continue to struggle with the number as 712 persons are currently hospitalized with COVID. 94 are considered severely ill, while 40 are classified as critically ill.
than 10,000 voters have applied to participate in the advance poll slated for next Thursday, representing just over 1/3 of the 30,000 people eligible to cast their early vote. This according to Parliamentary Commissioner Lovato Duncanson, who says the number is expected to increase before the September 4th deadline. He also says 450 voters have applied to cast an early vote overseas. The advance poll last election was reportedly disorganized, but Duncanson telling Eyewitness News that the department is doing all they can to make early voting as smooth as possible.
We have identified 9 centers on the island of New Providence to accommodate advanced poll voting. We have identified approximately 4 centers on the island of Grand Bahama to accommodate advanced poll voting, and subject to health and safety protocols of the various international and regional locations. It is our intent to facilitate advanced poll at approximately 9 overseas locations. And we repeat, those locations will be subject to health and safety protocols of the various locations.
Well, when asked if there has been any update with allowing those COVID-19 or people in isolation to vote, Duncanson says consultation on this issue continues.
We now bring you these international reports.
More than a day after Ida barreled through the northeastern United States, many parts of New Jersey are still underwater. But in Elizabeth, where the floods retreated, it left cars, flooded homes, and death in its wake. The water rose so quickly at this New Jersey apartment complex, it caught many people off guard. It submerged vehicles and pushed up against the doorways, trapping 4 people inside. People who lived on the second floor got calls from neighbors below.
The lady over here, she called my mom. She was like, oh, can you open the door? We couldn't open the door because the water was so high.
6,000 here have now been evacuated after the fact. Nearly 12,000 are without power.
Look at the water line. I came up here. Now,
the water got as high as Manny Cabo's front porch, submerging the lower levels.
This is 6.3 feet of water.
By the time he got the flash flood alert, the water was already rising. He's lived here 20 years.
We've had a little bit of flooding, but like anywhere else. But this was extreme. Like never in my wildest dreams did I anticipate stuff you see in the movie. It's stuff that's going on down south in New Orleans. I got that. We're by bodies of water, but not here. We're in the middle of the city.
New Jersey's Governor Phil Murphy says it's clear where the blame lies.
As we continue to contend with the reality of climate change, it is no surprise that these storms are happening with greater frequency and greater intensity. This conversation is one that we will continue having, probably for the rest of our lives.
In the state of Louisiana, where Ida first made landfall on Sunday, the death toll was lower, but hundreds of thousands of people across the state remain without power.
I'm hot, no air, no power, no generator. You can see the power line is down. I can't get out of my car to do anything and everything. No gas, no nothing. And I want to cry.
On Friday, U.S. President Joe Biden came to see for himself some of the worst affected areas. And he acknowledged the need to harden U.S. infrastructure to future storms.
Coming in, seeing all the poles down. Well, we'll build back better. We know if it's underground, it costs a hell of a lot more money, but guess what? It saves a hell of a lot more money long term.
Damages from Ida are still being assessed, but expected to be in the billions of dollars. Kristen Salumi, Al Jazeera, Elizabeth, New Jersey.
There's no question the Delta variant is why today's job report isn't stronger. I know people were looking, and I was hoping for a higher number. But next week, I'll lay out the next steps that we're going to need to combat the Delta variant, to address some of those fears and concerns. I want to talk about
For more on what those next steps could look like, let's bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, as we just heard, President Biden says he's going to be laying out a plan to better address the Delta variant next week. What can the White House do at this point, and what does that plan entail? Do we know?
It's a good question, Christina, that they still haven't entirely answered for us. The president did there what we like to call a tease, right? We do it ourselves, and he did it too. Aide so far not revealing much, but it's likely to include a mix of potential new public health responses to the variant, maybe a new push on vaccines as we head into the fall, and also potentially something to help juice the economy, given these disappointing jobs numbers. 5.2%, that is down. President points out correctly that in each of the 7 jobs reports of his presidency so far, jobs have been created. Problem is, economists were expecting far more, about 500,000 more. But it shows that just about at the beginning, mid-August, when the Delta variant really started to take off, especially in southern states, the jobs numbers or the hiring slowed considerably. And so while there's still a belief that the economy is doing all right, clearly it's being affected by this Delta variant and the pullback that a lot of people had to do in their buying and their spending and their reopening and then just their general economic activity.
Right. I mean, like you said, the president tried to emphasize overall his administration's success with creating new jobs, even though these numbers were lower than expected. So did he try to explain or justify why that happened? Did he defend this lackluster jobs report?
Well, I mean, he said, look, I wanted a bigger number too, but the Delta variant seems to be a big reason why. And if you look at certain sectors, especially in the restaurant and lodging industries, there was a big drop-off in jobs. And the fact that that occurred is a signal that people were perhaps postponing or putting off their late summer travels as that variant kicked up. And people realized that they had to distance again, wear their masks, and perhaps avoid indoor spaces or getting back on planes and trains. So 235,000, again, it was a net positive, but some economists were looking for closer to 700,000, and that certainly didn't happen.
You were listening to the WinFM Headline News on 98.9. Our top stories were:
face-to-face learning on Nevis delayed 1 week. Autopsy performed on the body of Wilson Dorr. Jamaica's COVID fatalities at a record high. More than 10,000 apply for advance poll in Bahamas. Biden visits Louisiana to inspect Hurricane Ida damage.
Thank you for listening.
That was the WinFM Headline News. The Headline News was brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, KDP Enterprises, The Grange, and Carib Brewery.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
With over a century of perfection behind the Mackeson name, a smooth blend with perfect balance and richness, it's no wonder Mackeson Triple Stout has a legacy of perfection. Enjoy the world over. Introducing our new look with the same great taste. Mackeson. All hail the king. Please drink responsibly.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International. By land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
We are faced with tough decisions every day, but choosing the right home or motor insurance shouldn't be one. You need fast claim settlement from a company that's been rooted for over 31 years. And don't forget the A Excellent rating by AM Best. Make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Reliable insurance that you can count on. Get a quote today for your home, motor, contents, and liability insurance needs, and make the intelligent choice. Caribbean Alliance. Tomorrow secured. Local agents, Dalil Walwyn & Co. Limited. Telephone 465-2631 or 469-5303 for the Nevis office.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
People make the world go
If you need protection, you need one who you can trust. To secure your investment, you need one who'll do you just. TDC Insurance, you're the one that you can trust. TDC Insurance, you're always safe with us.
TDC Insurance is your go-to insurance company for all your insurance needs. We take pride in offering you the best solutions and ensuring our customers are fully satisfied. TDC Insurance, we take good care of you, guaranteeing you peace of mind. You're always safe with us.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Welcome back to Inside the News. I am your host for this afternoon, for this episode of Inside the News, Kevon Brown. And today we were speaking with Dr. Cuthbert Sebastian earlier about long COVID, COVID-19, a bit about the Pfizer vaccine as well. And we will continue that discussion this afternoon. We will open the phone lines for anyone who wants to voice their opinion on the topic at hand. Long COVID, COVID-19, if anyone out there feels comfortable enough to share whether they had COVID-19 or not, what they went through, if they had long COVID and the situation. If you want to share, please call in. The numbers to call in, 466-0989, 662-0989, and 762-0989. Our U.S. numbers, 718-285-6984 or 305-921-4619. The phone lines are open for anyone interested to share. But we will continue the conversation about long COVID. And since last year, the World Health Organization, they've been actually talking about COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19 conditions, or long COVID as it is called. And I'm going to play a clip about Dr. Ghebreyesus, from Dr. Ghebreyesus. He's the Director General of the World Health Organization, talking about long COVID and what people went through.
Over the past few months, I have heard firsthand from people who face mid to long-term effects of COVID-19 infection. What's really concerning is the vast spectrum of symptoms that fluctuate over time, often overlap and can affect any system in the body.
I went through something I'd never gone through before. Being 26 and fitting well before that, I'd never gone through anything like that, and I was terrified. It's been 8 months, almost 8 months now, and I'm still suffering from fatigue, brain fog, chest pain, heart palpitations, digestive issues, short-term memory loss. It's just, there is no system in my body that hasn't been affected.
I was fit and well, and I assumed that this COVID illness would be, I'd be able to brush it off my shoulder. I never thought I would have 7 months of my life wiped out by this virus.
So by the end of June, I was so sick, I got admitted at the same hospital that I work at. I was on oxygen because I couldn't breathe. Initially, I got sick, it was June, now we are in October. So 4 months, I still struggle with shortness of breath. I think I survived because of the teamwork of both ICU and the ward.
Your stories underscore that those facing the long-term effects of the virus must be given the long time and care they need to recover fully. It also reinforces to me just how morally unconscionable and unfeasible the so-called natural herd immunity strategy is. It's imperative that governments recognize the long-term effects of COVID-19 and also ensure access to health services to all of these patients.
That was from later down last year, around December, I think, where the World Health Organization provided this report of people, young, old, male, female, of different races, who got COVID and experienced long COVID and had symptoms that, for an extended period of time, as we discussed earlier with Dr. Sebastian, from anywhere between 12 to 15 weeks sometimes, of debilitating symptoms, and symptoms that they're still researching, they're still trying to find, because of all of this is new. They don't have a direct way to treat any long symptoms. There are 200 or over 200 symptoms that people could be suffering from as it relates to long COVID. And while we're on long COVID, I wanted to touch on young people and long COVID. We Myself and Dr. Sebastian, we were talking earlier about young people and COVID-19 as well as long COVID. And hospitalizations and deaths of younger people from COVID-19 are surging, or have been surging. Adults of all ages, including young people, have become seriously ill, and many of them are dying. That was from the director of the Pan American Health Organization, Dr. Carissa Etienne. Even in the States, pediatric hospitalizations are running rampant because of the Delta variant. From June to August, the summer period when everything was open and free and numbers were lowered earlier, states started to pull back on certain restrictions, especially as vaccination rates were climbing. People were becoming more social. Masks were no longer mandated. Social distancing might not have necessarily been a thing that was being pushed forward. And then during the summer, cases started to rise, hospitalizations started to rise, and among them were young people, people in their 20s, people in their 30s, people in their 40s. And I'm sure we know someone, all of us who are listening, know of someone who's had COVID-19. I've known a couple of them who've had COVID-19, whether here or abroad, and it's not a pretty thing to understand, or a pretty thing to go through, I should say. And sometimes you feel helpless because of the nature of the situation. You can't be by their side taking care of them when they're going through COVID-19, or you could end up getting it. So there's that also added effect of feeling even more helpless in that situation. But many health officials, governments around the world, they've said that vaccination is the way, one of the ways to combat. We're not gonna disparage or neglect the non-pharmaceutical means, masks. I understand that people struggle a lot with masks, social distancing. As we are social creatures, it is near impossible to exist in a society completely isolated and completely alone and not able to socialize. We are social beings. We need it. It is in our blood. It's in our very being to socialize, and yet, because of the nature of this thing, it's making it harder for people to socialize the way they want to socialize, to travel the way they want to travel. Also, as we are on the cusp of schools reopening, in one of our news reports, you heard about the situation in Nevis where the premier announced, or it was announced, that face-to-face learning on Nevis would be delayed by 1 week. And later tonight, Premier, the Honorable Mark Brantley, he's supposed to be making an address this evening, and he'll probably be addressing that specifically as it relates to face-to-face schooling, which was supposed to begin on Monday, September 6th. But according to an article I was reading on the BBC, the risk of children getting long COVID is significantly lower than they expected it to be. So apparently they were doing a test for quite a bit of time as it relates to COVID-19 and its effects on children, and the post-COVID-19, the possibility of post-COVID-19 conditions for young children from 12 and under, specifically who can't take the Pfizer vaccine or any vaccine that is available for 12 and younger, or a little bit older between the ages of 12 and 17, that 2 to 14% of those that they tested had symptoms that caused that were from COVID-19 15 weeks later. according to them, they were expecting at least half, 50% of the people, of the children that they were testing, they were expecting half of them to have long post-COVID-19 conditions or long COVID. But from their tests, it was only 2%, 2 to 14%. Now, 2 to 14% is no number to laugh at. It's still a significant amount of children that have to go through post-COVID, long COVID symptoms, shortness of breath, fatigue, brain fog, and then the mental strain that brings on to children. And children have already been suffering because they are the most in need of social interaction, because it is part of their development to be social with their peers. And school closures and not being able to socialize has affected them physically and mentally. So the rates of infection for the young kids, though, of course, as many officials have been saying, it's higher in unvaccinated people than it is with vaccinated individuals. The risk is still there for vaccinated people, but it is significantly lower, and the severity of the illness is lowered. It's easier for children who are vaccinated to survive COVID, to not get severely ill, any severe symptoms, if they are vaccinated. Now, that would only apply to 12 and above for Pfizer, because there is no vaccine currently in circulation for younger children as it relates to COVID-19. And I guess that's the reason why officials have been saying that adults, teachers, parents should get vaccinated as a way to help protect these children, our youth, from getting the virus. But we're going to hear a little bit more about post-COVID-19 from the World Health Organization and some of the symptoms and some of the research that they've been doing.
If you have recovered from COVID-19 but are still experiencing some symptoms, you could have what is known as post-COVID condition. This is also referred to as long COVID sometimes. Hello and welcome to Science in 5. I'm Vismita Gupta-Smith. We are talking to Dr. Janet Diaz today. Welcome, Janet. Janet, let's talk about the symptoms that should alert a person that they may have this condition.
So some of the most common symptoms of post-COVID-19 condition, or as you said, long COVID, include shortness of breath, cognitive dysfunction, which people call brain fog, as well as fatigue. Those are the three most common. However, there has been more than 200 symptoms that actually have been reported in patients. So that list is quite long. So other symptoms that patients or people may experience includes things such as chest pain, such as trouble speaking. Some have described anxiety or depression, muscle aches, fever, loss of smell, loss of taste. So the list is quite long, but those top three are the ones that have been described.
Janet, how long does this condition last?
Our understanding of the duration or how long this condition lasts is still not completely clear. It has been described that the condition can last 3 months. Some have described as long as 6 months, and potentially up to 9 months. But as you know, we're still about 1.5 years into the pandemic. There's still more studies that need to be done to follow patients who develop post-COVID-19 condition or long COVID, and to see when their symptoms, we hope, resolve.
Janet, what about treatment for this condition? Do we have treatments available?
Any patient or person who develops post-COVID-19 condition should go seek care. The care pathways should be multidisciplinary in nature, meaning that they can include your primary care provider as well as relevant specialists, rehab professionals, social care workers, psychosocial workers, mental health professionals, and that's the type of care people with post-COVID-19 condition should receive. In regards to specific treatment, we don't yet have one. The reason is because we don't yet understand why this develops. So as we're learning more about the actual reason or mechanism of the disease developing, then we hope to have a specific treatment.
Janet, what do we know so far about vaccination and post-COVID-19 condition?
So there's still a lot to learn about the impacts of vaccination and post-COVID-19 condition. However, it is very clear that preventing SARS-CoV-2 infection, preventing COVID-19 is the best way to prevent the development of post-COVID-19 condition or long COVID. So the use of vaccines, we know, reduces hospitalization, reduces mortality, and so all those that are eligible should do that. Public health measures such as mask wearing in the appropriate places, physical distancing, hand washing are also extremely important to prevent COVID-19.
Thank you, Janet. That was Dr. Janet Diaz. Until next time then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stick with science.
People make the world go
Welcome back to Inside the News. I'm your host, Kevon Brown, for today. Today is September 4th, 2021. I hope that everyone is having a safe Saturday today. We are continuing the topic of long COVID-19, and living with post-COVID conditions. The lines are open for anyone to call in and voice their opinions, talk about the topic at hand or any topic related to it. The numbers to call, 466-0989, 662-0989, or 762-0989. If you're calling from the U.S., the numbers to call are 718-285-6984 or 305-921-4619. Feel free to call in. The lines are open. Inside the News is brought to you by TDC and Caribbean, St. Kitts and Nevis. Thank you very much for sponsoring, being loyal sponsors to Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9. All right, so let's continue speaking about the topic at hand. We're talking about, well, there's various topics that we touched on today, but the brevity of the situation that we're speaking on was long COVID-19. We touched on the disparities between being a fit person versus being a not fit person, and the myths with you being in the gym 6 days a week, and that might not necessarily be, or might not necessarily mean that your immune system is as strong as you expect it to be because you are a fit person, you are a healthy person, you take care of yourself. It all depends on if you have a balanced diet. So COVID-19 could affect someone negatively regardless of their body shape. It all depends on how strong your immune system is, how well you balance your diet. And I know that's a difficult thing to do, especially in a culture that's so heavily influenced by starches. We love our starches, as we were speaking earlier with Dr. Sebastian, but we need to work on boosting the balance. You know, everything in moderation. You don't overindulge in one thing, forgetting that other things exist. Be careful when you're trying these fad diets, because sometimes they do your body more harm than good. You know, talk to a nutritionist, your physician, get a good grasp of how your body operates, what your body actually needs to get the best immune response to live a healthy life. I think that was the breadth of what Dr. Sebastian was getting at earlier, that you need to actually get professional opinion. It doesn't necessarily have to be a doctor. You could even talk to some of your local elders in the community who probably know a lot of herbal and medicinal, natural remedies. You know, your bush tea and all sorts of bush that we know and are prevalent in our society. Whenever we get sick, a lot of old heads would tell you exactly what to get, whether it's maiden apple, whether it's cattle tongue, whether you warming up some water and soaking some ginger and garlic in it and then just dousing that down. You know, there are various many ways to help with your system. We have plenty of people within our culture, within our society, whether it's medical doctors or whether it's bush doctors, as we call them, who can help with boosting your immune system, boosting your metabolism, and living a healthy life. Especially in this time of COVID, where it's obvious that we're in our third wave of COVID-19, and the cases are seemingly in the same range of numbers as when we were seeing it in June and July, when we had the curfews and the lockdown, or the partial lockdown. The numbers are up there, and as we know, the lockdown isn't going to happen. Another lockdown is not likely, and it won't help the situation necessarily, because the economy is dependent on us being able to move, and without being able to move, then we'll be in a worse situation. So you got to do what you have to do to take care of yourself. And I understand that some people aren't vested in the vaccine. And if that is the case, in order to protect yourself and protect the people around you, protect your family, your loved ones, adopting the pharmaceutical means, at least, should be something that is a regular, daily, natural thing that you are practicing. You wear your mask when you're around people, when you're in public supermarkets, public transportation. You social distance as much as possible, and you sanitize, and you eat well. You take your vitamins, and if you're feeling ill, see a doctor or stay home. If you feel it's necessary to get a test, take a test. to see if you have COVID-19 or not. Better sure than sorry, but I understand that nobody's going to willingly go take up a test because it's not exactly economically feasible. But you got to do what you have to do to take care of yourself. And some people decided to take the vaccine to not only protect themselves, but to protect their vested interests, their family, their loved ones, their livelihoods, etc., etc. We were also speaking about the Pfizer vaccine earlier with Dr. Sebastian from the JNF Hospital. As we know, the Pfizer vaccine was rolled out on September 1st here in the Federation, and Dr. Sebastian outlined a very lengthy and seemingly complicated process in the administration of the vaccines. You have to move it from sub-zero temperatures, which is a slow process, from sub-zero temperatures to a freezer, and then ultimately to a refrigerator where it's thawed and then mixed with another solution, a solution that's mixed with a powder, and once that occurs, according to Pfizer themselves, you have 6 hours to use that, which explains why as Dr. Sebastian mentioned, it explains why the rollout might have taken a bit of time, because healthcare professionals had to get trained in order to properly administer the vaccine, because it seems like the Pfizer is a very delicate vaccine, which is why it wasn't widely shipped around the world when it first came to fruition, because many healthcare systems didn't have the capacity to store it or the training to actually administer it, as it is a long and involved process. And as we've heard, once it is thawed, it cannot be refrozen again. So it kind of explains why the rollout was a bit slow, and I think people needed to understand. I think that needed to be communicated to people, so people understand why it took some time for the vaccine to be rolled out. For them to understand, hey, this is a tricky vaccine. We all hear that it was a tricky vaccine long time. We don't necessarily have the freezer capacity to keep it for too long. So we have to get our healthcare workers properly trained in how to use it, and we have to make sure that we actually have the people who are ready to accept the vaccine freely, of course, by appointment, so that we don't waste the vaccine. Because if you don't have enough people, enough arms, after 6 hours, that's it. The vaccine is gone. It's trash. And as we've heard in several reports here and probably in other media houses, there are plenty of countries that are desperate for vaccines, but they can't get vaccines. They don't have the necessary personnel or access to vaccines. And that's why they're suffering in the way that they're suffering. So to be a bit sympathetic, I can understand why officials are pushing the vaccines, because it is so hard to get vaccines for certain countries, for a lot of African countries, Central and South American countries, to get their hands on vaccines. So apart from accessibility, vaccine access, there's also vaccine hesitancy. People have far-fetched concerns. People have genuine concerns. People want to observe for a bit what happens as a result of these vaccines, and to keep an ear out on any studies about, the continued safety. Pfizer was just recently made the first FDA-approved full-fledged vaccine in August there. So it's the first vaccine that is a fully fledged acceptable vaccine. And the rest of the vaccines have already put in their proposals for approval full approval. AstraZeneca, I think, already did it. Moderna already did it. And the Janssen, the J&J vaccine, they already put in a proposal to attain full-fledged status. And what is the process of getting to a full-fledged status? And I'm going to play a bit of a report here to explain that process a bit so that we can understand a little bit how vaccines get full-fledged approval.
We start today with the FDA fully approving Pfizer's COVID vaccine. NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joining me now. Dr. John, this is the first COVID vaccine to get full approval. Can you explain the difference between emergency authorization and full authorization for the folks at home? What does this mean for them?
And Allison, you bet. And like you're right, this is the first COVID vaccine to get full approval. And the difference there being we have 3 vaccines right now that have the emergency authorization, the emergency use authorization, and that was given back December, January timeframe, a little after that. When they measured that and when they looked at the data there, their main point was to make sure that it was safe and effective and it outweighed the dangers of COVID itself. And so it was a little bit more of a lenient process. They used 2 months worth of data to do it. They did make sure it was safe and effective, but it was a little faster than the normal approval process because we're in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of an emergency. Well, now fast forward to August, and what they wanted are these companies to give them 6 months of data after their human trial volunteers ended up getting their vaccine. So Pfizer started submitting data back in May, submitted it through August, and finally said, okay, now we've given you the data, go ahead and look at it. The FDA went through, crunched all the data, and they did a few things. Number 1, made sure it's safe. Number 2, make sure it's effective. But number 3, they're also looking at the manufacturing plants, the factories, to make sure that those are up to snuff, that the quality of those factories and what they're putting out is sufficient. And they're going to make sure that these manufacturers follow patients for the next months and years to make sure it remains safe. The difference there, probably the big difference for people overall, is this is a permanent approval. This is something that doesn't just happen during the pandemic, but it's permanent. And like most other medications, you're going to see it being able to be ordered through your doctor's office, given to you at pharmacies like it is now, but even more so. And so it's going to be even advertised. They gave it a name, Allison. It's Comirnaty, which we haven't had not had a name before, but that's the new name for it.
Comirnaty, I can picture the commercials on cable news right now, right, with the long list of things to ask your doctor about, those pharmaceutical commercials we are bombarded with. So, Dr. John, the Pfizer vaccine only started rolling out last December. There are some concerns that this approval is happening a little bit too fast. Here's the FDA's acting commissioner addressing that today.
We want to underscore that our efforts to move as quickly as possible have in no way sacrificed scientific standards or the integrity of our process. Approving the vaccine as rapidly as possible while ensuring a rigorous and thorough review has been our top priority.
What's your take, Dr. John? How would you explain this one to a concerned patient who thinks, man, that happened quick?
Yeah, Allison, it's interesting. A few weeks ago, I actually had Dr. Peter Marks on my Doc to Doc series, and that's the gentleman you saw in the picture there. His job is to make sure these vaccines are safe. His job is part of that division to make sure that they approve these appropriately. And what he told me is typically after they get all the paperwork and all the data, it typically takes them 5 months to fully approve it. And that's because it's a small department, small part of the FDA that does that, and they do it on their own time scale. Well, he said now because of the pandemic and the fact they need these vaccines, they're putting all hands on deck. They ended up putting a lot of resources into getting this approved, and they wanted to do it safely, effectively, with the same standards they had before, but much faster by putting a lot more help in there, a lot more manpower in there, and that's what they did. And that's why they were able to do it in 3 months instead of 5 months. And so you're seeing here a faster approval process, but didn't cut any corners, didn't go shy in any safety measures, is the same as before, just had a lot more people looking at it.
Dr. John, full approval also paves the way for more mandates. The Pentagon confirming today service members will be required to get the COVID vaccine. Take a listen.
Now that the Pfizer vaccine has been approved, the department is prepared to issue updated guidance requiring all service members to be vaccinated.
New York City is doing little teachers and staff. Do you expect to see more institutions jumping on board here, and would you like them to?
You know, I think we are going to see more institutions jumping on board after my 32 years in the military, where we had shots for just about anything, because on a moment's notice, you could go anywhere in the world and you need to be protected. That's the bottom line. Well, now we're here in a pandemic and everybody needs to be protected. And so a lot of these institutions, a lot of these organizations are saying now that it's approved, which is what we were waiting for, we can start mandating it because they've looked at it, they've vetted it, they've seen that it's safe and effective, and it's going to be here for a long time. So let's go ahead and get people vaccinated, get this pandemic more under control. I think you're going to see that move over to the civilian sector as well. You can see more organizations, more businesses start to mandate it to make sure that, number one, that their employees are safe, but also anybody that might be taken care of is safe as well. And that way, hopefully, again, Allison, like we mentioned, the pandemic will get over sooner rather than later by getting more people vaccinated.
From the South, 98.9. Win FM.
People make the world go
This is Inside the News on WinFM 98.9. I'm your host this afternoon, Kevon Brown, and we are headed into the last half hour of Inside the News. But before we continue, let's take this a quick break to hear from our sponsors, TDC and Cara Brewery.
People make the world go round.
Summer is here. Oh, but so much to do. Renovating the house, preparing for back to school. Plus, I really could consolidate some loans to free my hand for some extra cash. Let me think. Where should I go? TDC Financial Services. I can get up to $40,000 unsecured in their Hello Summer Loan promotion. And then I'll be able to get all I need. Hello Summer. TDC Financial Services. Here I come.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects or sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Welcome back to Inside the News here on WinFM 98.9. I'm your host for this afternoon, Kevon Brown, filling in for Devon Cornelius. The conversation today was focused on long COVID or post-COVID-19 conditions, that is, existing symptoms of COVID-19, 12 to 15 weeks after you have recovered from the virus. And according to officials, there are being they recorded over 200 different symptoms that relate to long COVID. Some being respiratory issues, making it hard to breathe, some reporting a fogginess or a haziness or a symptom that affects your memory, short-term memory loss, and some are physiological and mental. People are going through short-term depression because of going through the symptoms of this virus for an extended period of time. And I have this COVID-19 special that was done yesterday, actually, that addressed the long COVID and how it impacts or affects people, how long COVID affects people around the world. We'll listen to that now.
Long COVID, a phenomenon which is still puzzling researchers around the world. Many people who were infected with COVID-19 have had long-term problems after recovering, even if they weren't very ill in the first place. The list of symptoms is long and wide-ranging: extreme tiredness, shortness of breath, heart palpitations, chest pain, and problems with memory and concentration. Many also are afflicted with chronic pain. The severity of symptoms varies, but many have been left unable to deal with everyday challenges like cleaning, grocery shopping, and they report problems communicating. Treating long COVID patients requires doctors to take into account both physical and psychological symptoms, and to sometimes consider experimental treatment, like recuperation in salt mines. This is your COVID-19 special on DW. I'm Janelle Dumalaon. What exactly causes long COVID? In this next report, we meet someone who has it and examine the theories as to why she's experiencing it. Have a look.
You can't tell by looking at her, but every one of her movements takes immense strength. For a year now, Jennifer Nails can hardly do anything on her own. She has chronic fatigue syndrome after COVID-19. I've never felt this exhausted before in my life. I actually need hours to get dressed, to wash myself. I constantly have to lie down and rest in between. Every couple of minutes, her body forces her to stop and rest. Even during our interview, the 43-year-old needs to take breaks over and over. For years now, Carmen Scheibenbogen and her team at Charité Berlin University of Medicine are among the few researchers studying chronic fatigue syndrome. The scientists are familiar with the symptoms, which are similar to those of infectious mononucleosis. Not everyone who has COVID-19 and developed long COVID also shows signs of chronic fatigue syndrome. It's only a possible consequence. Researchers currently have 3 hypotheses on how and why CFS develops. First, the immune hypothesis. The immune system gets confused. It wants to fight the SARS-CoV-2 virus, but overshoots permanently. There's a constant overreaction in the blood vessels. Too many antibodies and T cells on a continuous basis. When the immune system is hard at work, we feel exhausted. Everyone's familiar with the symptoms, from pain to lack of concentration and other typical flu-like symptoms. All that can come from the immune system. So the immune or autoimmune hypothesis can explain the whole clinical pattern. Second, the blood circulation hypothesis. The blood vessels in the body become inflamed, right down to the smallest veins. They can no longer properly dilate and constrict. The blood circulation is disturbed, which even affects the mitochondria, the cell's tiny powerhouses. The result is that organs and muscles cannot function optimally and become weak. If the vessels are not supplied with blood, then there won't be enough oxygen in the tissues, which in turn means the body can't produce enough energy. This can quickly result in muscle pain during exertion, headaches, and concentration loss. Third, the nervous system hypothesis. In this case, researchers believe that the nerves cannot properly function. There's limited conductivity. The nervous system, which also controls unconscious bodily functions, is under constant stress, and that leads to dysfunction in the entire body. The nervous system is no longer functional. The most typical example is the loss of taste and smell, which is also a function of the nerves, but also memory loss and problems with concentration. Scientists believe that these three mechanisms, separately or together, could trigger chronic fatigue syndrome. But because so little research has been done, it's still hard for doctors to know how to effectively help patients like Jennifer Nails.
David Strain is a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Welcome back to the program. David, you have experienced long COVID yourself. We last talked about that earlier this year. How are you doing now?
I'm doing much better. I'm still not 100%, but I'm fully functional at work. I still do wake up with a pain. I still do get tired a lot quicker than I used to do, but on the most part, making a pretty good recovery.
Certainly glad to hear that. But you said back then that the natural history was not clear yet. Do we know more now?
We are getting more and more data as to the people who are making a full recovery versus the people who are making partial recovery versus the people who are not getting better at all. And at the moment, the numbers appear to be a third of each. So a third of people who get this seem to make a full recovery, back to normal, no residual symptoms. A third of people make good enough recovery so that they can go about their activities as usual. They go back to work, they spend time with the kids as normal. And then there's a third of people that do appear to be still suffering very badly 12 or now 15 or 16 months after their original infection.
Now, one of the hypotheses about the causes of long COVID is that it's in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cells, an area in which you are doing research, of course. Can you tell us about your findings there?
It's very early to say things for definite. We are seeing some evidence that actually in the report earlier, you were talking about the autoantibodies, and there is some evidence of the autoantibodies that are actually targeting mitochondria. And there does appear to be an overlap that the mitochondria are not reproducing as well. And that fits very much with some of the patients or the profile of some of the patients who present with this, that they are starting the day feeling okay. They just fatigue very, very quickly. And the interplay between these autoimmune and mitochondria does appear to be a big factor. That is actually really promising, because if we can clarify exactly how that's happening, it does open itself to treatments that are actually treating the cause, rather than at the moment we are very much dealing with the symptoms.
Now, chronic fatigue syndrome, of course, a part of long COVID. Is that the worst manifestation of long COVID that one can get?
Well, there are many different manifestations, and actually there are some people whose fatigue isn't that bad, but are presented with lots of chest pains or lots of palpitations. But for many, 91% of people who get long COVID are troubled by this fatigue. And the fatigue itself can be incredibly debilitating. Actually, the name chronic fatigue syndrome doesn't do justice for just how bad these people are experiencing it. As in your report, there are people who just can't do simple tasks. The idea of chopping some carrots has to be done in multiple stages. And for those, the worst bit about it is there is no visual recognition. If they had big cuts, if they had big rashes, if they had something that you can say, yes, this is the problem, it's much easier to address that. Whereas because the fatigue, there's no way of measuring it, there's no way of observing it, there's no real test for it, then people very often struggle to have the severity of their condition recognized.
David Strain is a senior clinical lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Up next, Derek Williams with one of your questions on long COVID.
What do we know about the reduction in long COVID risk by vaccines?
The data shows that vaccines very clearly help save lives and spare nearly all recipients from the worst ravages of COVID-19. But do they also reduce the chances of developing possible long-term effects in the weeks or the months after you should have recovered? At least 1 in 10 people have those. And we know from studies that even those who have mild symptoms initially can go on to develop what's called long COVID, which is a wide range of chronic complaints linked to infection with SARS-CoV-2 that for unclear reasons persist in some people. Knowing whether vaccines could also help prevent long COVID from developing has therefore been a very pressing question, not just in terms of the potential human cost, but also because long COVID looks set to have a huge impact on national healthcare systems all over the planet in years to come. So if vaccines could help prevent not just serious initial disease, but also the development of long COVID in breakthrough cases, then that would be a really huge bonus. And on Wednesday, researchers published evidence that they likely do. The major study led by scientists at King's College in London looked at information registered via an app by millions of adults in Britain, both vaccinated and unvaccinated, in roughly the first 6 months of this year. And it found that in people who'd been vaccinated but later tested positive for COVID-19 anyway, the chances of having symptoms for 4 weeks or more after infection, so long COVID, were only around half that in unvaccinated people. Now, that's not necessarily the last word on the topic, but it is a strong indicator that vaccines don't just help prevent serious disease. They also probably go a long way towards keeping people who have breakthrough infections from developing long COVID.
Thanks for watching. Stay safe and see you again soon.
As you were just listening to that report, sentiments were echoed similar to what Dr. Sebastian, who was on the morning half of the show, was saying as it pertains to vaccination helping with long COVID, helping to prevent people from getting long COVID. We have a caller. Good afternoon, caller. You're on Inside the News. Hello, good afternoon. We seem to have lost that caller, unfortunately, but please call back. Please feel free to call back, caller. But as I was saying, the report was echoing the sentiments from Dr. Sebastian as it relates to the vaccine being a preventative measure for long COVID, and he even mentioned that some reports suggested that the vaccine helps with long COVID. Good afternoon, you're live on Inside the News.
Yes, good afternoon. I've been listening to the discussion since it started this morning with Dr. Sebastian. Very good discussion, lots of information provided, and I hope that people were able to listen to get the information from a medical professional as well as the reports that you played from WHO and other health professionals. My take on the situation, well, I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't professionally advise anybody to take the vaccine. I say, you know, you look at the information that is being provided, credible information, and you make that decision whether you want to become vaccinated or not. I know earlier when this whole vaccine thing came on board, many people had genuine concerns as to the safety of the vaccines.
And I think
now we're seeing that
persist.
the Pfizer vaccine is being administered in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that is a vaccine that has been fully approved by the FDA. So I hope that for people who had a concern about the safetyness of that vaccine in particular, that they would go out and become vaccinated once, of course, they get clearance from their personal doctor. But very good discussion, and I'll be listening further. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, caller. Thank you very much for calling in. A familiar voice. But thank you very much for calling in and sharing your sentiments. And I agree. We all need to do our own research as it pertains to the vaccine and whether we want to take it or not. We'll take this caller. Caller, you're live on Inside the News. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and how are you this afternoon?
Okay. Maybe I need to say something to really correct something that you said.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah. I tuned in late, right? But I didn't hear everything, but I guess this is on the last tail of it. But you said the clip that you played, especially what the last presenter was saying.
Right.
That the doctor that you had, right?
Mm-hmm.
That presenter was expressing the same sentiments that the doctor that you had expressed. But to me, I think it's the other way around. The doctor was expressing the sentiments that the presenter had or presented. I think I heard you mention that this information has been around, or the testimony of the persons were from last year?
No, that recent clip, that last clip that I played, that was uploaded yesterday. That's a very recent clip, that last one.
Okay. Well, the testimonies of the persons, some of them were from last year?
Yes, some of them were from an earlier clip, yes.
The information on long COVID is from last year?
Yes, one of the clips that I played earlier, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. My point exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I have some things to say, that I have my own conclusion that I have drawn about this thing here. And I'm cutting to the chase with all of the talk and all of the information that is going around. I have narrowed this down, and I have my own analysis. I don't think I will give it right now, but I think I am right with the conclusion that I will be drawing. But I'll leave it there. I don't know if I will express it on this radio station or some other radio station. I don't know. It all depends. But I don't think it will be accepted. I don't think people want to hear it, because most of the times now when I listen, I don't think people really and truly want a discussion on this thing. I think they just want information out there that is going to support whatever point of view, whatever information they want people to have from this thing. To me, it is one-sided, because information is out there too, that those who are responsible have put out, but people refer to it as conspiracy theory. But now persons are seeing that a lot of these things that what they call ordinary folks are common folks, the intelligence and the brains that the Lord has given them, they have thought for a reason to this thing, and a lot of things persons have been saying before being exposed to a lot of this information, and now it is coming to pass. But I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to spoil your presentation. I didn't hear it from the beginning. I don't want to spoil anything. So just let it continue on the trajectory that it's on. Have a blessed day, okay?
Thank you so much for calling in. I want to thank that caller for calling in and expressing her opinions, although she didn't express her full, as she said, analysis on the topic at hand. It's probably going to touch on, as she mentioned, some people might not like it. And I'm certain that there are many people out there who have similar opinions that are not readily accepted or will never be readily accepted as it relates to this whole COVID-19 situation, the vaccine situation. Certain things that are deemed as conspiracy theories or justifiable reasons as to why certain people don't want the vaccine, etc., etc. And while vaccinations have always been around, from smallpox and measles and all of that stuff, certain people put a certain level of trust in those, I guess because they have a longer standing history, etc., etc. And one of the main concerns was the quickness with which the current vaccines for the coronavirus came to fruition, and certain people are waiting for certain vaccines to finish developing, getting approved, etc., etc. This situation is not simple. We can never make this a simple situation. Some people are trying to make it simple, as in if you take the vaccine, then that is it, and that might not necessarily be the case. We have one caller. I think this will be the last caller that we'll take before we wrap up. You're live on Inside the News. Good afternoon.
Pleasant good afternoon. All folks on the panel. Carl Brown here. And good afternoon to the listeners home and abroad. I want to touch on the vaccine and corona situation.
Go right ahead.
I'm going to say this again. So, and all of you on the panel, we are fighting the corona the wrong way. You don't need no vaccine. As we can see, look on all the news, look all around the world, vaccine has not done nothing for the people. Right? It caused more harm and more good. Now, what is happening here in St. Kitts Navy, so, and you could let the NOC give you all some statistics, right? Look around. The children are home from school. They are running up and down in the sun. They're catching the fresh air. They're in very little air condition. When we hear children having corona, is the adults wherever they went, bring it home and give it to them. Now, look what's happening around. You could get these statistics from the NOC, and they should do this, you know. Look at all of us who are working in the sun every day. Ask them how many contact tracing they did with construction workers, mechanics, plumbers, right? Carpenters, people who cut grass and all those things. Those statistics with the corona, you could check with the NOC, are very, very low. Our way, we got to go outside the box and fight the corona with the sun and the fresh air. Hear what is spreading the corona, why we having all this peak in these cases. We leave from home, we drive to work in air condition. How many people clean the vehicle, the air condition when they clean in the vehicle? The corona, if you have corona, you're gone in the air condition, other people come in your vehicle, they absorb it. You're gone in quarantine. You go to work, most of the people working in air condition. And check all the government places, all the private places where they go and shut down and pick up air condition. If they would open up the doors and the windows, shut off the air condition, have people come in and clean them, and let the sunlight and the fresh air come in. I guarantee you folks on the panel, in 1 month, I will see a tremendous decrease in the corona cases. Right? Also, some of the people that are in quarantine and had the corona, they got air condition at home. So they left air condition home, jump in the vehicle, air condition. They go to work, air condition. What happened to them? They catch corona. We out here in the sun every day. How many of us catch corona? The sun and the fresh air, lock off all the air condition, clean them and leave them off, let the sunlight and the fresh air come in, and I guarantee you folks, we will be the first in the Caribbean and in South America and all them things that kill the corona. We have to fight it outside the box with the sunlight and the fresh air. I'm gone, folks. Any questions?
No, thank you, caller.
And they must try this, you know, and if they try it, I tell you guys, in 1 month, we will have a change in our corona cases. And we won't have to use no vaccine.
Well, thank you, caller, for your contribution. Again, thank you, caller, for your contribution. Like I said, that will be the last call we'll be taking this afternoon because we are officially out of time. We are at that 1:30 mark, and that brings about the end of Inside the News. The discussion today, I think, was just the beginning of a longer conversation. It's always just the beginning of a longer conversation as it relates to COVID-19 and its effects on everything that it touches. But we here at WinFM, we are dedicated to continuing the conversation, and we welcome the questions, we welcome the views, we welcome the positions, we welcome differing opinions on topic at hand for future discussions. So please feel free to let us know what you think. I'm Kevon Brown, signing off from Inside the News. Please stay tuned to WinFM 98.9. For more. Have a good afternoon, a great Saturday, a great weekend, and stay safe out there.